Sometimes the hardest thing isn't being rejected, it's being invisible, not hated, not loved, just ignored. And that silence, it can mess with your head. It can make you question your worth, your voice, your existence. When a woman doesn't notice you, doesn't respond, doesn't look your way, the world starts whispering lies that you're not enough, that you don't matter, that you should shrink yourself just to be seen. But here's the truth. Most people won't tell you. Being ignored is not a verdict on your value. It's a moment, nothing more. This talk isn't about blaming anyone. It's about understanding yourself, standing still in your own skin, and learning how to be so solid, so real, so grounded, that whether someone notices you or not, you never disappear from your own life. Because respect doesn't begin when someone chooses you. It begins when you choose yourself. There was a time when silence felt personal, when every unanswered message, every missed glance, every moment of being overlooked felt like a quiet judgment passed on who I was as a man, like the world had paused just long enough to tell me I wasn't chosen, not today, not this time, maybe not ever. And that kind of silence doesn't scream, it sinks in slowly. It sits with you at night. It asks questions you never invited, questions about worth, about masculinity, about whether effort means anything if no one seems to notice, and the dangerous part is how easy it is to start believing that silence is a verdict, that being ignored means being invisible, and being invisible means being nothing. But silence isn't a weapon, it's a signal, and most people misunderstand what it's actually saying because silence doesn't explain itself, it doesn't defend, it doesn't accuse, it just exists, and when someone doesn't respond, it doesn't automatically mean you failed, it often means they're somewhere else in their own world, fighting battles you can't see, carrying preferences that have nothing to do with your value, and the mistake is turning someone else's quiet into your personal failure. Because the moment you do that, you hand over control of your self-respect to someone who never asked for it. And that's where the damage starts. Not in being ignored, but in how deeply you let it define you. Because silence can teach you something if you're willing. To listen differently, it can show you where you're seeking validation instead of building it. It can reveal how much of your confidence depends on external approval. And that realization hurts, but it also frees you. Because once you understand that attention is not owed, not promised, not guaranteed, you stop chasing it like oxygen. You start breathing on your own. And there's strength in that, quiet strength, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to exist. And when you stop reacting emotionally to being ignored, when you don't rush to prove yourself, explain yourself, or lower yourself just to be acknowledged, something shifts inside you. You stand a little straighter, you speak a little slower, you move with intention instead of urgency, and people feel that before they ever hear your words. Because confidence isn't loud, it's steady, and silence stops feeling like rejection when you realize your life continues perfectly fine without that response, that text, that validation. Because your purpose doesn't pause just because someone didn't notice you. Your growth doesn't stop just because someone looked past you. And the truth is, being ignored is often a test not from them but from yourself. A test of whether you'll abandon your values for attention or protect your dignity in the absence of it. And every time you choose dignity, you win something far more important than approval. You win control over your own narrative, and that's W. Hence, silence loses its power, because it can no longer shake who you are. It can no longer make you smaller. It can no longer convince you that you don't matter. And once you reach that place, being ignored doesn't feel heavy anymore. It feels neutral, almost peaceful, because you finally understand that your worth was never waiting on someone else to confirm. Its self-worth isn't something you bargain with. It's not a currency you trade for attention, affection, or a reply. And the moment you start negotiating it, you start losing pieces of yourself without realizing it, because worth doesn't increase when someone chooses you, and it doesn't decrease when someone ignores you. It exists before all of that, steady and untouched, but many people hand it away slowly, adjusting their tone, their values, their boundaries just to feel noticed, just to feel wanted. And that's where the quiet damage happens. Because when you reshape yourself to fit into someone else's approval, you stop standing in your own truth. And people can feel that even if they don't consciously recognize it. They sense when someone is asking to be accepted instead of owning who they are. And nothing fades interest faster than a man who doubts his own value, who waits for permission to matter, because confidence isn't arrogance, it's alignment, it's knowing who you are even when no one is clapping, even when no one is looking. And when a woman doesn't respond, doesn't engage, doesn't acknowledge your presence, the instinct is to question yourself, to replay every word, every action, wondering what you could have done differently. But that spiral assumes something dangerous. It assumes your value is on the table to begin with, open for debate, open for rejection, when in reality it was never hers to approve or deny. And once you understand that, you stop chasing validation like it's a missing piece of you. You realize it was never missing. You just forgot where you placed it, because self-worth is built in solitude, in discipline, in the promises you keep to yourself when no one is watching. It's built in how you treat people who can give you nothing, in how you walk away from situations that require you to shrink, and when you stop negotiating your worth, you stop explaining yourself unnecessarily, you stop overgiving to be liked, you stop tolerating disrespect disguised as indifference, and something changes in how you move through the world. Your presence becomes calm, your words become measured, your energy becomes grounded, and that kind of energy doesn't beg to be noticed. It draws attention naturally, not because it's trying to impress, but because it's complete on its own. And even if attention never comes, even if someone still chooses to ignore you, you don't collapse inward, you don't chase, you don't become bitter, because your foundation isn't built on external reactions, it's built on self-respect. And self-respect doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it simply exists and can by silence, unbothered by disinterest. Because when you know your worth, you don't need to convince anyone else of it. You just live it quietly, consistently, without apology. Attention is never something you can force into existence. It doesn't respond to pressure, to pleading, to over-explanation. It responds to authenticity, to presence, to a life that is already full without needing to be watched. Because the moment you start chasing attention, it starts running in the opposite direction, not out of cruelty, but because neediness carries a weight people can feel. And that weight makes every interaction heavier than it needs to be. And when a woman doesn't notice you, the temptation is to do more, say more, prove more, become louder, funnier, more impressive. But effort without grounding turns into performance, and performance never creates real connection. It only creates temporary interest, the kind that disappears the moment you stop trying. And that's exhausting, because you can't perform forever, and you shouldn't have to. Because attraction isn't built by asking to be seen. It's built by being so rooted in who you are that being seen becomes a byproduct, not the goal. And that rooting comes from direction, from purpose, from a life that moves forward whether someone is watching or not. Because people are naturally drawn to momentum, to someone who is going somewhere, not someone standing still hoping to be chosen. And when you focus on building your strength, your skills, your discipline, your inner world, something subtle happens. Your energy changes, your conversations slow down, your reactions soften. You stop filling silence with insecurity. And that calm speaks louder than any clever line ever could, because attention is attracted to stability, to certainty, to someone who isn't afraid of being alone in their own space. And when you stop begging for attention, you stop sending the message that you're incomplete without it. You start showing that your life is already in motion, already meaningful, already whole. And whether someone steps into that or not becomes their choice, not your anxiety. And that shift is powerful, because now attention is something that arrives naturally, or doesn't, without shaking your center, because you're no longer chasing eyes. You're building a life worth looking at. Presence isn't about being the loudest in the room or the most noticeable. It's about being fully where you are without apology, without rushing, without needing to fill every moment with words, because desperation leaks through noise. But presence lives in stillness, and people can sense the difference immediately. They may not know why they feel it, but they do. And when you're desperate to be acknowledged, your body moves faster than your mind. Your words trip over themselves. Your attention is scattered, always checking for reactions, for approval, for signs that you're being seen. And that searching pulls you out of the moment. It makes you less real, less grounded, and ironically less noticeable. But when you slow down, when you stop chasing responses and start owning the space you're in, something shifts, your posture changes, your breath deepens, your eyes stop asking questions and start making statements. And that kind of presence doesn't demand attention, it commands respect quietly, because it's rooted in self-trust, not in expectation. And when a woman ignores you, doesn't respond, doesn't engage, staying present means you don't collapse into self-doubt, you don't spiral into overthinking, you remain where you are, solid, aware, intact, because presence is about being comfortable with yourself even when no one is validating you. And that comfort shows in how you listen without interrupting, how you speak without over-explaining, how you allow silence without trying to escape it. And silence handled with confidence becomes powerful. It stops feeling awkward and starts feeling intentional. And people lean into that because it feels safe, it feels real, it feels rare. And the truth is, desperation tries to control outcomes. Presence accepts reality, and acceptance is strength, not weakness, because when you accept the moment as it is, without resistance, without self-blame, you free yourself from the need to be chosen, and in that freedom your presence becomes unmistakable, not because you're trying to stand out, but because you're fully standing in your self-growth has a quiet way of changing how the world responds to you, not overnight, not loudly, but steadily. Because when you evolve internally, your external reality eventually has no choice but to adjust. And many people focus on being noticed instead of becoming better. They chase attention instead of progress. And that keeps them stuck in the same place, repeating the same patterns, wondering why nothing changes. But growth doesn't announce itself, it shows up in discipline, in consistency, in the hours no one sees. And when you commit to that process, your energy shifts before your circumstances do. You start carrying yourself differently. Not because you're trying to impress, but because you're no longer the same person. And that difference is felt, even when it's not immediately acknowledged. And when a woman ignores you in one chapter of your life, it doesn't mean she would ignore the version of you that's still being built. Because growth reshapes your confidence, sharpens your boundaries, clarifies your direction, and those things change how you are perceived. But the mistake is growing for approval, growing so someone else will finally notice you, because that keeps your power outside yourself. And growth fueled by validation collapses the moment validation doesn't come. Real growth is personal. It's rooted in curiosity, in self-respect, in the desire to live up to your own standards. And when you grow for yourself, attention becomes a side effect, not a goal. And even if it never arrives from a specific person, you don't feel cheated, because you gain something far more permanent: strength, clarity, purpose. And with those, you stop asking why you're being ignored. You start asking where you're going next. And that forward focus is what slowly changes how people see you, not because you demanded it, but because you outgrew the version of yourself that needed it. Respect doesn't arrive from the outside and move inward. It starts inside and radiates outward. And when you don't respect yourself, the world mirrors that back in subtle ways. Through silence, through indifference, through being overlooked, not as punishment, but as reflection. And many people confuse respect with attention, but they are not the same. Attention can be temporary, shallow, inconsistent, while respect is stable. It's built over time, through how you treat yourself when no one is watching, through the standards you refuse to lower, through the boundaries you hold even when it costs you connection. And when a woman ignores you, it's easy to feel disrespected, but the deeper question is whether you're honoring yourself in that moment or abandoning yourself for reaction, because respect is shown in how you respond, not in how others behave. And when you choose not to chase, not to argue, not to explain your worth, you send a quiet message to yourself first, that you matter enough to walk away with dignity, and that inner decision changes everything. Because people may not always like you, they may know always choose you, but they will feel your self-respect. It shows in your calm, in your patience, in your refusal to beg for space in someone else's life. And self-respect creates a presence that doesn't need permission, it doesn't need validation, it simply exists, solid and unshaken. And when you live from that place, being ignored no longer feels like an insult. It feels like information, a sign pointing you toward environments, connections, and people who align with the standards you've set for yourself, because respect, once rooted within you, becomes the filter through which you move through the world, quietly guiding you toward what belongs and away from what doesn't.